Goeienaand en welkom, baie dankie dat julle weer eens ingeskakel het. Ter ouder gewoonte op 'n Sondag aand 7uur, hier by Klipkop. Weet ek, is alweer 'n bietjie laat, 9 minute oor. Ek het presies 7uur gekyk, toe was dit nou net mooi pikdonker. Een van die dae, sal julle kan sien, hier kom so 'n liggetjie hier deur. Ek wil goeienaand sê aan. O ja. Kom ons begin heel bo. Mike Simpson, wat die eerste was in die kleedskool, goeienaand Mike Simpson, as ook RJJ wat vir ons sê, awee. Goeienaand Finnie Simpson, is altyd lekker om vir jou ook hier te sien, saam gesels. Swart, dankie vir jou teenwoordigheid. En anti-Marxist ZA, nog een van die OG's wat hier by ons is. Laasweekse episode het ons gepraat van Oedasoa. En ons het baie lief vir Oedasoa geraak, want hy is teen die Kaapmans, en ons gaan nou in 'n Alliansie vorm, en Oedasoa se mense gaan vir ons help om van Domaan en sy mense te kry, en dan gaan ons hulle nou aanval. Die maatskappy het nou offisieel aangekondig, dat daar is nou oorlog tussen ons en die Kaapmans. En dis waar ons dit laaste gelos het. En in vanaand se episode, ek het klaar my kameraatjie reggemaak vir julle. Mooi in fokus en alles. Hier kan julle sien, ek het gemerk, oorlog Oedasoa, man, hier was verskriklik baie leeswerk. Hulle het sulke lang briewe geskryf, alles van hoe great it is, hier waar onderstreep het, should be very glad if he saw it fit to send us some of his people, either alone or in the company of a few of our soldiers, in order to search and spy out where we could come upon our common foe, and that if we could point out where they were. En dit was baie offisieel, man, ek het die hele tyd gesit en lees van hoe hulle vir mekaar lief het. En ek gaan nou nie vir julle lieg, dit gaan aan. Hier stuur hulle nou nog 'n storie uit na Oedasoa toe. Fine lovely weather, ek moet begin met die datum. Ons is nou op Sondag die 22ste Junie 1659. Fine lovely weather as before. In the morning at about 8 o'clock, our party of 13 men departed to visit Oedasoa, the chief of the, skryf hom, mighty Kochokwas. They were accompanied by the above-mentioned envoys and the interpreter Eva, and took with them on a wagon drawn by 6 oxen several articles as presents. They were seen on their way as far as the other side of the Brakke River, natuurlijk die Soutrivier, by the fiscal and 2 mounted men who daily patrol the approaches to keep them clear of our enemies. May the Almighty grant that this chief is sincere in his intentions, and that our men may return unharmed with the desired report. Jan van Riebeeck wil so gou as moontlik, wil hy van Domaan en sy spannetjie ontslae raak. En hy sien so half, dat hierdie Oedasoa Alliansie is nou eintlik die enigste uitweg, want die Kaapmans is besig met guerrilla oorlog, en hulle weet nie hoe om hulle self daarteen te verdedig nie. Op Robben Eiland, die skape is besig om te vrek. Onthou nog, hulle het vir Jan Woutersen afgedank. Sonder goeie rede, hulle sê net in die boek, hy het homself wanneer gedra. Hoe weet ek nie, hoe weet niemand nie, maar hy moes onmiddellik van ontslae van word, toe hulle die ryk Overhagen daar ingesit. Hulle het ook gesê, Jan Woutersen, hy laat van die skape vrek. Hier was nou op 'n tyd 500 skape op die eiland gewees. More than 100 sheep had died in it, and that the rest had died off until only 100 were left. No improvement could be observed, but the rabbits were multiplying freely everywhere. So daar is amper nou net hase oor op Robben Eiland. Hier kom die manne van Oedasoa af terug. Oedasoa was nog laaste hier by die Tygerberg, uitgespan gewees. Hoor, dis nie te ver nie. Dis nie te ver nie. This evening, long after the gate had been shut, our deputies returned from Oedasoa, the chief of the Kochokwas. They were accompanied by 6 other envoys from Oedasoa. Amongst them were his sister's son and Eva, the interpreter. The sergeant reported that the chief had sent some men to meet them quite some distance from his camp, and that he had acted with tokens of great pleasure the greetings and presents sent to him by the commander. When he learnt of our good intentions and whatever else had been ordered to be conveyed to him, he had thrust his hand into his bosom as if to clutch his heart, and had said, Lo, it is impossible to tear my living heart from my bosom, otherwise, if it were possible, I should send it to the commander, but let him take the soul from my bosom unto himself, and join it with his, so that they may never be separated. Jonge klink omtrent of die mense begin trou. Hulle gee vir mekaar beloftes voor in die kerk. Tell him that I myself intend to visit him soon to weld our hearts together like pieces of iron, thus making them so solid. Ja, wacht, kom ek blaai gou hier om. Dinge raak spicy vanaand. PG-18. That no one in the world will be able to break them apart or cleave them asunder. Wat die hel beteken dit? Hier is die Hoog-Hollands. Ek gaan dit nou nie probeer voorlees vir julle nie, maar dit is nou wat daar gestaan het. Ek weet, hulle het ook so geskrik toe hulle hierdie stuk lees, en ja, maar hulle moet die Hollands ook insit. En vir die mense te wys, ja, maar hulle lieg nie. Concerning the plundering Goringhayinas and the Gorachohunas, he said that he was delighted that we could at least see they were nothing but scoundrels and bandits, and that it was his mission and aim in life to punish these men and others like them. He wished, after he had consulted with his counselors, who were the elders of his people who shared in his deliberations, to speak to the commander personally and inform him how the thieves were to be caught, since he knew more about the lie of the land and the nature of the inhabitants. He would thus give us good advice. Nou maar toe, daai was ons nog die hele tyd die plan gewees. Hier kom ons nou by die eindelike plan, ek het hom gemerk plan. Among other things, the sergeant had given him to understand that we needed only 1 or 2 of his tribesmen to show us where the robbers were in hiding, and that we would then know how to use our forces to bring them to subjection, with God's assistance. To this he had replied very briefly, being a man of few words, but an exceptionally reserved and courteous person. It is good, the commander need not be so hasty, but should be good enough to exercise a little patience. When I visit him, I shall discuss everything with him personally, and give him such good advice that he will be well pleased with it. If he will bide his time a little, it will do him no harm, nay rather, it will be to our greater advantage, and will lead to victory over the robbers. Kyk, hier vanaf vorentoe raak dit net 'n verskriklike liefdesstorie. Oedasoa had quickly bidden them farewell, and they had departed with Eva and 6 of his people, who were unarmed except for small sticks, which they then carried in their hands as a proof that they had complete confidence in the protection of our people. Ek gaan net daar vir julle opsit, hier is weet by informasie, maar anders te kom ons nou nie verby hierdie stukke nie. Die mense wat daar wil gaan saamlees, kan maar daar gaan saamlees. baie inside informasie oor Eva ook. Hier is 'n stukkie wat ek gaan onderstreep het. Upon this Eva, who had been sitting there leaning on her sister's shoulder, said that after a short deliberation and discussion amongst the oudsten, nou dis natuurlik die ouderlinge, so she called them in Dutch, they had made the following reply in these very words. King who? This, according to Eva, is the way the elders addressed him. We observe that at present you are blessed with great fortune, for you and Ngonomua, who is next to or under you, are today the mightiest in the land, before whom because of the host of your warriors, everything must give way at the first suspicion that you are approaching. Moreover, you are one of a more courteous nature than Ngonomua. You are far more loved and respected than he is. As soon as the report is spread that you have formed an alliance with the Dutch people, all the world will then regard you as the most fortunate chieftain in the whole country, and will come from all quarters to seek your friendship for the sake of the goods of the Hollanders. Nou maar hierso, dit is nou weer van hulle sing mekaar praises, en hoe sleg die ander mense is. Die mense wat daar wil gaan lees, ek meen dit is net nog meer, ons het nou die aand gesien hoe hulle mekaar goed praat. Powerful chief, jy weet. Dit is net respek en dissipline. Hier het ek 'n stukkie gaan onderstreep. The interpreter Eva also reported that Oedasoa had said that the Kapens had offered him the first cattle which they had stolen from us in the beginning, as well as some copper and tobacco. They had said, these cattle belong to you, take them back and let us be reconciled and forget about our previous troubles. So hierso is dit nou van, ja, die Kapens was glo by Oedasoa gewees, en hulle het gesê, ja, maar kom ons vorm eerder 'n alliansie. En hier kan julle nou sien, ja, maar Oedasoa het gesê, nee, hy en die Hollanders is een, alles net great, man, dit is te fantasties. Wat 'n stukkie is dit hierdie? Hierdie is nou, ek het eers a wicked deed was committed on the 10th by the Freeburger Albert Dirksen and his mother-in-law's servant Hans Jacobsen. Ja, ons moet onthou, baie van die Hollanders wat hier aangekom het, ek dink dit mag dalk die meerderheid gewees het, was knegte gewees vir ander mense. Hulle sê hierso, they had scaled the walls of the company's outer works or cattle kraal, and they stealthily made off with the gun of the sentinel, who was not sleeping, however, but was busy relieving nature. So die ou lopvang, ek weet nie of hy in nommer 1 of nommer 2 lopvang, het is seker daar in die bos, nou terwyl sy zip nog op was, toe gaan gryp hulle nou hierdie geweer. He pursued them and demanded his gun back, whereupon they struck him fiercely as though they were barbarians instead of Christian men. They had no orders to inspect the guards of the fort, other than to call out to them when passing and to answer when hailed by the sentinels. This they had not done. They had thus committed a very serious crime which might have had most grave results, especially in this present time of war, and if the matter came up before a court-martial, they would come off badly. Nou op die ouend van die dag, ja, maar die familie en die arme vrouwe, wat ek al so af die storie toegesmeer, the council has decided not to bring the case before a court-martial. Toe gee hulle net so 'n bietjie van 'n fine en so aan, so al so 'n tikkie oor die vingers. Interessante stukkie. Dark overcast sky in the morning and a fairly stiff northwesterly breeze with occasional driving rain, but the commander nevertheless went out with some burghers. Behind the mountains they pointed out to him various narrow passes through which the Hottentots more than 7 years ago had driven the company's cattle, which they had stolen from us in the first of their raids. He therefore now had these places strewn with caltrops, so that if our cattle grazing round the fort were again driven off, we should know where and how we could pursue the robbers and come face to face with them by taking shortcuts. By these means we should be able to check them as much as possible or cut them off. These caltrops are in places where our people have no need to go or to look for pasturage or vegetable and grain land, since the soil there is unsuitable and the situation inconvenient. Wherefore there no fear of our people walking into the traps, and the crews of the ship that puts in here will be warned against them. Weet julle wat 'n caltrop is? Ek het dit gaan Google. Ek dink ek gaan sommer nou 'n breek maak, ek gaan my entjie light. So, laas keer, die eerste keer toe hulle die veewagtertjie doodgemaak het. Toe, hulle het met die vee verdwyn, maar hulle is nie ook nie heeltemal seker hoe het hulle van die vee ontsla, hoe het hulle die vee uitgedryf nie. Toe het hulle nou die plek gekry wat hulle dink. So hulle het nou gaan caltrops gooi by daardie plekke waar hulle dink hulle die vee dryf. Waar is my, kom ek maak gou eers hierso oop voordat ek maak daar 'n plus, trek ek hom hier in. Ok, nou gaan ek my kameraatjie afsit. Oh, caltrops. Sien julle, dis amper hierdie spikes wat hulle gooi met tyerstuk in te steek. Dit is caltrops. Weet julle wat die Afrikaanse woord hiervoor? Dan kyk hierso. From English to Afrikaans, nou sê ek, hy kan dit nie vertaal nie. Daar is nie 'n vertaling op Google daarvoor nie. Kan julle vir my sê wat julle dink is hierdie goed se naam? Ek het dit actually hierso in potlood neergeskryf. Kom ek trek vir julle weer die voor my. Wie het 'n dislike gegooi? Moet seker 'n troll wees. Ag, dis 'n interaksie, dit tel ook. YouTube sien dit, iemand was getrigger. Iemand was getrigger. Ek verduidelik dalk die storie nie heeltemal soos wat hulle wil hê ek moet dit verduidelik nie. Koek. Dis nou weer die spasmes wat my vanaand opneuk. Kry ek nie my koffie geslukkie. Dis kon toch. Het raak morsig hier op Klipkop se show. Hoekom lees ons Afrikaner held daai piece of kyk ou Hollandse teks nie voor nie? Nee, ek moet hom eers geloop oefen het. Ek het dit so gekyk, gebesigtig. Sê ek nee wat? My lyf is nie lekker vanaand nie. Het julle al gedink aan daardie woord vir daardie spikes wat hulle onder mekaar se wiele gooi? Jan van Riebeeck sê vir ons Nederlanders het weliswaar baie blootstelling aan Engels, maar ek glo Jan alleman Afrikaner praat en verstaan Engels beter as ons. Dis 'n moontlikheid. Ek weet ek het 'n paar Afrikaner vriende wat. Ek het Afrikaner vriende met Engelse vanne wat nie 'n woord Engels kan praat nie. Ek kan nog nie enige familie se name in die skande steek nie. Nee, ek gaan nou maar eerder my bek op. Ek gaan nou nie die ou se van sê nie, maar dis 'n dik Engelse van. En die ou kon norra fok Engels gepraat het. Werp sterre. Dit klink na 'n mooi beskrywing, Jan van Riebeeck. Wat ek gemaak het, is ek het na DBNL toe gegaan. Daar het ons mos die Hollandse weergawe van hierdie spesifieke teks. So ek het nou gedink, omdat die oud Hollands en Afrikaans so soortgelyk is, sal ek heel waarskynlik 'n mooi Afrikaanse woord daar kan loop sien. En is presies op dieselfde manier gespel en alles. Hulle praat van voetangels. Dink julle nie daar is 'n mooi beskrywende woord nie? Voetangels. Ninja sterre. Dis die heeltyd toe ek ook die eerste keer daaraan dink, toe ek ook gedink aan ninja sterre, maar dit is nie. Die ninja sterre is die staf wat jy gooi. Hierdie is die staf wat jy in trap. Dis voetangels. Ek het gedink miskien aan staaldubbeltjies, jy weet, dis kan ook beskrywend wees. Maar ek hou nogal van die idee van 'n voetangel. Om lekker as jy eenkie double clutch en hy filter collapse onder die hitte. Mense, my lyf en hand. Klipkop gee baie professionele livestream. Dit is hoe die mense in dis hoe hulle hom daardie tyd neergeskryf het. Voetangels. Dis hoe hulle hom in 1659 neergeskryf het. Voetangels. So dit is nie my uitdinksel nie, jy weet. Dis nou maar hoe hulle gesê het hy moet genoem word. Die oorspronklike woord. Hier is nou natuurlijk die Engelse vertaling wat ons lees. Domina Morgul. Goeienaand Klipkop en ouens en Finie, vrek, laat en seerskop. Vrek, laat en seerskop. Ek en Klip sal in die Outjikone sit vanaand. Oei, vrek, laat en seerkop. Vrek, laat en seerkop. Alright, ek het eers op Brendan Campbell gegroet nie, sorry, Brendan Campbell. Ons bondgenoot, ons Soutikaner in die chat. Desktop. Nee man, ek wil nie daai en ek wil daai. Here we go. Natuurlijk, Harry Hoofman, ons, hierdie mense gaan oor die vingers getik word, hulle die Sentinel, sy geweerloop steel toe hy 'n pis gevang het. Voetangels. Ek het daar nog 'n hakie gemaak, DBNL. Dis waar ek die woord gekry het. Hier leer ons nou weer van Oedasoa. About halfway through the forenoon, the aforementioned party of 6 from Oedasoa left again after being handsomely treated. En ek gaan nie so oor die goed begin spring, want dit is baie lank. He thought that the continual going to and fro would be too tiring and had requested that Eva of her own free will should journey back and forth, and in particular on this occasion, so that she might inform and instruct him how the fruits and other delicacies sent by the commander should be prepared and dressed. Het smaak my, ja, Oedasoa sê, hou op, want hulle het seker nog 7-8 keer, ons kan nou nie 7-8 keer nie, 4-5 keer mense gestuur, hulle wil graag weet waar is die Kaapmans, hulle wil bloot gooi. Hulle kry nie die Kaapmans nie. Hier so 'n bietjie admin en so aan, wag, jammer, hier op die einde. By our granting her this freedom, Oedasoa's people will be made more confident of our good intentions towards them and of our sincerity. Dis nou natuurlik, hulle het gesê, Eva moet rondgestuur word. Eva moet nie meer skorrelgoed was vir Jan van Riebeeck, sy moet gestuur word na Oedasoa toe, op en af. Hier word 'n bietjie administrasie gedoen, julle kan maar daar loop lees wat hulle daar alles gedoen het. Hier kom 'n skip aan, die Oranje. The Oranje carried 410 paid men, of whom 15 had died and about 40 were lying ill. Ek wonder al die mense wat so siek lê en hulle praat van scurvy en daardie tipe goed. Was dit nie daar COVID gewees nie? COVID-19. Dit kon dalk gewees het. Ons moet dalk hulle getalle ook bysit by die COVID sterftes getalle. Hier praat ons nou weer van Oedasoa. Is dit nou 'n resolusie wat hulle gemaak het? Ja, dis nou 'n resolusie wat hulle gemaak het, Saterdag, die 28ste Junie. In order to tempt Oedasoa, the chief of the Soldanas, to come to us all the sooner, it is decided immediately to dispatch to him this day a special mission consisting of 7 persons. Daar het hulle nou net gesê, Oedasoa wil nie meer mense, hy moet net vir Eva stuur, dis fyn. Nie spesiale missie. So hulle gaan nou nog 'n missie stuur na Oedasoa toe. Hier leer ons dat die Afrikaners smokkelaars is. Every day it becomes more apparent to us that burgers who are not tavern keepers are paying a lower price for brandy, and the result is smuggling, surreptitious debauchery and illegal taverns. Ons het shebeens gehad. It is thus decided now to fix a uniform price of 56 stivers a quart for brandy from the company's store, so that all evasions and irregularities may be prevented as far as possible. Mense wil graag glo in hierdie kapitalistiese droom dat ons almal vryheid het om ons eie geld te loop maak, maar dit was nie waar gewees daardie tyd, dit is ook nie waar in die moderne tyd nie. Daar is die mense gekokblok, hulle mag nie shebeens oopmaak nie. Nog oor Oedasoa en Ngonamoa. Our men returned very early in the morning with the report that they had found Oedasoa in a very weak state. Hy was natuurlik mos deur 'n leeu gebyt gewees, sy skouer en sy arm is glo amper heeltemal vermink. Hulle praat ook hier van Ngonamoa. Ngonamoa, this confrater or second in command has also arrived there and joined Oedasoa. Ngonamoa too intended to visit the commander in person, since 21 of his cattle had been driven behind the mountain and stolen by the Kaapmans 2 days before. So dit lyk vir my Ngonamoa wil nou ook 'n alliansie vorm met die Hollanders. Hier stuur hulle weer 'n klomp mense na Oedasoa toe. It is decided once more to send messengers to Oedasoa and to show greater respect by having the fiscal take along a wagon tomorrow morning as if for the purpose of fetching him. Hulle stuur sommer nou die fiskaal hierdie Abraham Gabema. Stuur hulle nou persoonlik, hulle stuur nou 'n baie belangrike man. Oedasoa sê, chill 'n bietjie uit man, relax, ons sal die Kaapmans kry. Jan van Riebeeck sê, nee, ek stuur nou een van my belangrikste manne om vir jou te loop haal. Waar en al, stuur die hele toetie daar af. Towards evening, 9 additional messengers arrived, bringing with them 15 sheep for barter. Ek so hulle daar 'n paar skaapetjies geruil. Hierso kom ons nou by 'n aanval. Dis nou op die 1 Julie 1659. Fine clear weather and variable breeze. During the night, a fairly large band of Hottentots again made an attack on the commander's farm at the Bosheuvel. Natuurlijk, die Bosheuvelplaas is die wat die verste is van die fort af. Die heel verste plaas. But because of the good lookout that was being kept, the attempt failed. Our men, however, were unable to attack any of them with firearms. Okay, hier het ek geskryf Oedasoa met 'n nota bene by. Ek dink hierdie gaan nou 'n groot stuk wees. Ek wil julle nie verveel het met die... Dis al klaar 40 minute in die storie in. Kom vat gou 'n swing hier so, stort. Windpomp sherry. Ons maak het gou seker, ja, dis die 1 Julie 1659. The fiscal Abram Gabema returned this afternoon from Oedasoa, the chief of the Soldaners, with the report that he had found Oedasoa weak and in great pain, and so, as yet, unprepared to accompany him back. An additional reason was the illness of his child, to whom he seems to be most closely attached. Furthermore, it appeared that the chief was not altogether satisfied with the interpreter Eva, since she had caused us so much inconvenience by making us undertake these fruitless trips backwards and forwards. So dit spraak my Oedasoa begin raak so half gefrustreerd, omdat die manne elke dag daar by hom is. He had sent a message that he had no use for a wagon to bring him to the fort, as he could not bear the jolting, nor could he ride upon an ox in the manner of his people. So we should wait until his health improved, and that of his child as well, it would seem. When he was better, he would come by easy stages. Presumably, Eva had mentioned the wagon chiefly for her own benefit, so that she would not have to travel on foot, and in other matters too had added to the messages which Oedasoa had asked her to convey by interpretation. Because Oedasoa was apparently also of this opinion, he had looked with some disfavour upon her, without, however, showing towards us signs of anything but the friendship proffered and his promised closer alliance with us, and sincerity about making war on the Kaapmans. He had assured the fiscal that he would present himself to the commander at the fort as soon as he was able, so that he might address him personally, and he had as he has previously promised, and deliberate further upon these affairs. Ek is vir die ouds, nou so half bepleid, mense, ek is siek, ek is nie lus om na die fort toe te kom nie. Moenie elke dag mense stuur nie. O ja, kan ek nou weer die ding balanseer. Hy gaan nou 'n bietjie ruk, jammer man. On his journey, the fiscal touched at the encampment of Ngonomua, who, as various indications led us to believe, is at present Oedasoa's second in command. The fiscal was informed by him, and also by Eva, that it had been arranged that Ngonomua would accompany her to the fort that very day, but that on visiting Oedasoa that day he had been restrained by him. Oedasoa had asked the fiscal to tell the commander to go to no further trouble to send emissaries to him. It is as though he were concerned that at the fatigue of our men. He had said that he would reply upon his coming without fail as soon as he and his child were better. Otherwise, he would send Ngonomua along with Eva. When the fiscal requested that Oedasoa should agree to give us only 1, 2, or 3 men to show us where to find the encampment of the marauding enemy, he could not make up his mind. So nou, ons nou al klaar so half effens van 'n koue skouer gekry, nadat hulle net so lief was vir mekaar en love letters vir mekaar, sing your praises. So nou sê ons, gee ons net so 3 maande, dis al, jy hoef niks te maak, gee ons net 3 maande, wys ons waar is Domaan in sy trawante, en dan is alles uitgesot, en ewe skielik daar, dit kan nou nie gebeur vir een of ander rede nie, so dit begin raak nou al klaar verdag. The fiscal further reported that on their way back home, our party had encountered 3 Hottentots on their way to Oedasoa's kraal with an ox which had a rope tied to its horns, in the same way as the company's draft oxen. As these diverse circumstances have given us some cause for misgiving, the council, augmented by the skipper, the merchant, and the sergeant of the ship, Oranje, at present lying at anchor here, has agreed and resolved, after mature consideration, to dispatch 10 scouts chosen from our own men to go in search of our enemies. Ok, so hulle sê, dit lyk nie of hierdie Oedasoa regtig wil help nie. Hulle gaan nou 10 manne uitstuur om te gaan soek nou weer vir die Kaapmans. The search shall extend from the high Steenbergen of this cape over all the dunes from the Bay Falls to the Hottentots Holland, which lies approximately east-southeast, 10 hours journey from here, in a straight line, behind the first mountain range of Africa. When the scouts return, we shall consider further what steps should be taken in the best interests of the Honourable Company. In the meantime, we must be perpetually on the watch, both for this Oedasoa and for the marauders. So, hulle raak nou baie verdag oor Oedasoa, our declared enemies, who made another attack last night on our people at the Bosheuvel. We shall also have to bide our time until Oedasoa reveals his intentions more clearly. May it please the Lord God to grant us that which is best. That's done and resolved at the Cape. Natuurlijk, die gewone manne het daar geonderteken. Daar's 'n paar extra name, Nathaniel Walter en Gysbert van Kampen. Ok, hulle gaan nou 'n soektog uitstuur. Ek gaan nou vir julle 'n kaart optrek terwyl ek 'n entjie aansteek. 'n kaart optrek, dan ek vir julle nou mooi wys waar is die. Want ek het al Google Earth try nie. Kom ons gou vir julle hierso op. Jan van Riebeeck sê, voetangels is die ou benaming, werpster die nuwe Hollandse term. Daar het ons hom nou. Geweer gesteel, raak civilians desperaat. Ek dink hulle het so half net hierdie ou vir 'n gat gevat. Hulle het gesien daar gaan, hy was seker besig om te skyt of iets. Toe dink hulle, jy weet, hulle gaan nou grapgatte wees en hulle gaan nou die ou se geweer steel, net net met hom te terg. En toe, jy weet, rook die storie 'n bietjie hand uit. Toe mine Morgul nie 'n daylight robbery, terwyl 'n ou sy tank gestaan en leegmaak het agter 'n bos. Een P sou hulle seker nie genoeg tyd gegee het. Ek dink het kan miskien ook 'n nommer 2 wees, ja. Dat die ou eers moes afvee, voor hy hulle kon agterna sit, jy weet. Ok, kom ek trek gou daar die kaart op. Ek wonder, het ek nog Google Earth? Kom ek trek maar net die gewone Google op. Nou, hulle praat hier in die boek. Wat sê hulle hierso? From the high Steenbergen of this cape, over all the dunes from the Bay Falls to the Hottentots Holland. Nou, hierdie is 'n groot stuk. As 'n mens nou inzoom, vir die mense wat nou nie die Kaap ken nie, die fort is omtrent hier waar Kaap sentraal nou is. Nou, die ronde bos is nou hier, so hierdie is nou die verste plaas, hierdie is hoe ver die Hollanders nou uitgebrei het, net hierdie stukkie. Nou, die Steenbergen lê hier onder. Nou gaan hulle mense stuur om hierdie hele stuk, hierdie stuk, deur tot by die Hottentots Holland gebergte. Hierso by Jonkershoek, Hottentots Holland Mountain, hierdie hele stuk, moet hulle nou gaan soek vir daardie mense. tot agter die eerste bergreeks. Ek neem aan, dis hier die bergreeks, wat die, hel, sit en praat ek nou hier, en julle kan nie sien nie. Kom ek probeer weer. Hierso is Rondebos, en hierso is waar die fort is, so, al die plasies lê so half in, as wat hierdie pad nou hier omloop, al die plasies lê so half hier, al die plase lê eintlik hierso, hierdie is daar, Korenhoop, en daar die type plekke, en julle sien, daar lê die plasies, daar is die berg, daar is die fort, natuurlijk die bosheuwel, is hier net langs Tafelberg, daar is Tafelberg, daar is Rondebos, so die plase lê net hier so, en hulle gaan hierdie hele stuk, gaan hulle nou loop fynkam, tot by die eerste bergreeks, hier by die Hottentots Holland bergreeks, tot agter hierdie stuk, moet hulle nou loop deur soek, so dit is 'n verskriklike groot area, wat hulle nou moet loop fynkam. Alright, kom ek loop hom net half, dan skuif ons aan. Ek het dan so effens van 'n break gehad. Ok, hulle stuur nou hierdie scouts uit. Hier begin die soektog nou. At noon, 10 men were sent out as scouts for the above-mentioned purpose. Ag, ek gaan nou nie deur alles lees nie. Die volgende dag, the same fine weather, in the afternoon, news was received that behind the Bosheuwel, a band of over 300 Hottentots had been espied dancing and leaping. Immediately orders were therefore sent to the ship of a company of fully armed soldiers to be put ashore at once so that they might be deployed at the Bosheuwel and elsewhere for an attack upon these jubilant enemies. A similar report was brought by members of Stevens and Jan Reinertsen's companies that the slopes of the Bosbergen were seen to be teeming with Hottentots and that they scarcely dared to remain in their homesteads. Resolusie van 'n aanval, dit is basies net van, dis meer administrasie, hulle trek nou 'n klomp soldate van die skip Oranje af, dan gee hulle vir hulle 'n klomp van die seevaders, mense wat meer belangstel aan seevaderry, stuur hulle terug op die Oranje, dan vat hulle meer soldate, sodat hulle self kan beter verdedig. Ek dink hulle sê onder 25 of 26, and in addition to reinforce our garrison with 25 or 26 of her soldiers. So hulle trek nou manne van die Oranje af om te kom help beklei. Sê, hier begin skryf ek nou al Oedasoa met 'n vraagteken, want die man begin raak nou 'n bietjie suspect. This morning the junior merchant of the Oranje, who had been at the fisherman's house at the Salt River, reported that Oedasoa's men on their way back home from the fort with generous presents had caused trouble at his house. They had tried to frighten the fisherman's wife, who was alone at home, into giving them bread and tobacco, but when she seized a gun and threatened them point blank, they made off with the most insolent gestures and threats. So one wonders what new developments there will be, and who are friends or who foes, especially as Oedasoa's men travel to and fro unarmed, which makes us suspect that they cannot be such enemies of the Kaapmans as Eva's interpretation would lead us to think. It is furthermore noticeable that the robbers are showing themselves everywhere in greater numbers, while at the same time few people were to be seen in the encampments of Oedasoa and Ngonamoa, according to yesterday's report by the fiscal. What is more, on his way back, he had seen the ox with ropes tied to its horns being driven by a party of Oedasoa's people. So hier kry hulle nou snif in die neus. Hierdie idee van hierdie span is teen daai span en teen daai span, verskillende groepe, dit lyk al hoe meer as dit dalk kan BS wees. Daar is ook 'n narratief, as wat ek het weet die ander mense se interpretasies oor die geskiedenis al nageluister het, is dit, hoe dit aan my vermaak verstaan was, is dat daar was hierdie definitiewe groepe gewees. Maar vanaand sal ons nou sien dat, dit kan dalk tot in 'n mate waar wees, maar as jy die boekeloop klaar lees, kan jy sien dit is eintlik baie min waar. Baie min waar, is ver van die waarheid af eintlik. On his way back, he had seen the ox. Okay, het is nog klaar deurgelees. Gaan ons nou verder oor die soektog. En hulle teruggekom en they had seen absolutely nothing. So dit was nou heeltemal onnodig geweest, daar die mense wat hulle uitgestuur het. Hier maak die oranje reg om weg te vaar. Teken al die mense, Pieter de Kok, Hendrik van der Put, Robben Eiland, hierso, dit is die Jan Woutersen vloek. Hulle wou vir Jan Woutersen gefire het, onnodig, kyk wat gebeur nou. Today the Skarpenjacht arrived from the Robben Island with the following note to the commander Jan van Riebeeck. Honorable Sir, here with 50 fowl's eggs and 29 sheep aboard the yacht. There are thus 40 sheep left, among which there are some that are showing signs of also getting the disease, so that it is feared that they will not survive. The carpenters will have finished their work by the end of next week, and the thatcher will have enough twine to last until then. Our servant respectfully requests your honor for the following articles: 4 shirts, 2 pairs of shoes, 1 piece of chintz, and 1 pound of tobacco. Ja, julle wil mos vir Jan Woutersen. Daar's 'n moontlikheid van die skape mag dalk gevrek het onder sy wag. Kyk, julle het oor die 500 gehad, nou is daar 40 oor. Slinksheid, ek het hierdie gemerk as slinksheid. In the evening, fully 40 of the Soldanas of Oedasoa and Ngonamoa came with only 8 sheep. We pretended we could not understand them, and it was signified to them that they should always bring Efa with them to interpret. Spioneer en weer eens Oedasoa met 'n vraagteken. Ek dink ek gaan dit alles lees nie. Die mense wat na die tyd daar wil gaan saam lees. Julle kan maar saam lees. Hulle praat hier so, ek moet tog van die vlaggie lees. A number of free burghers reported that yesterday afternoon on leaving the fort, 5 or 6 of the Soldanas went straight home carrying their little flag, but the rest returned at nightfall, of whom 7 had hidden in the Bosbergen, the rest close on 30 in number, having taken the passage which goes through the pass called Leeuwkloof, dis natuurlijk Kloofnek Pas, behind the fort. Their intention seems to have been to skip the Gevelbergen and proceed to the Hout Bay along the coast. The arrangement might have been to meet the others in the Kloof Pass and join forces with them in the Bosbergen in order to watch for an opportunity to raid the cattle of the company or the free burghers. Kom ek tyg weer die kaart hier so op. As nou 'n bietjie inzoom hier so. En natuurlik net so dat julle bearings kan het. Hier natuurlik hier's Rondebos, net so suid van Ronde. My internet is nou nie gelukkig met my nie. Is dit nou, ek minimize hierso. Hierso is Ronde, hier is Jan van Riebeeck se plase, hierso is die eerste plase. Nou maar hierdie mense, hierso is nou die hoof in 'n uitgang. Nou maar hierdie klomp van hulle het nou ewe skielik het hulle nou hierso, hulle het gesê nou maar, hulle gaan nou hierso deur hierdie is nou ook glo die stuk waar Harry hulle die eerste keer die vee omgedryf het. En ek weet nie hoe hulle klomp vee hierdeur kan dryf nie, maar net 'n bietjie suid hier vanaf, hier lê die kleine houtbaai. Nou hulle verdag dat hulle miskien van die ander mense het nou hier omgekom en hulle gaan nou hierso hulle troepe by mekaar kry en dan die Hollanders aanval sodat hulle nie hier verby Duinhoop en Korenhoop, daar waar die kanonne staan, daar verby hoef te loop nie. So hulle gaan nou aksieplanne maak in dit. Immediately, a party of 11 men was sent around the other side of the mountain to occupy the kloof pass, for the Saldaners will have to pass that way. Their instructions were to do as much harm as possible to those who can be caught there, since they could have no other object in being there but robbery. Nou het ek vir julle die kaart gewys het, daar is geen rede hoekom hulle daar moet uithang nie. If the Saldaners fell into the trap, we could tell Oedasoa by means of Eva that nobody but robbers are ever met there, and that he should keep his people away from that place, or whatever else may suit the purpose. So hulle sê, hulle worry nou nie meer of het Oedasoa se mense is of wie hulle is nie. As hulle mense daar kry, maak hulle vrek. If, however, they are not found in the Kloof Pass, it may be presumed that all our enemies are hiding in the Cape Mountains and that these Saldaners have gone there to have discussions with them. This would mean too that they are all treacherous rogues together and that we have cause enough to be more vigilant than ever. It is to be hoped that they will remain ensconced there, for we should then almost have them ensnared. The commander intends to go out in person to investigate and at the same time to point out all the inexperienced ones, the passes and approaches everywhere, and instruct them how these are to be guarded. Hier kom nou nog 'n skipie in, die slot van Honingen, with 341 paid men, of whom 12 had died. About 80 are laid now, and about an equal number managed to keep on their feet, although suffering from scurvy. Het klink omtrent soos die COVID-19. In spite of the war against the Hottentots, there is, praise God, no shortage of refreshments for her crew. Wel, as het 40 skapies oor op die eiland, ja. Dat lyk my die oranje gaan nou uiteindelik nou huis toe. Oedasoa met die os gevind. Dis nou nog 'n os storie met Oedasoa. At about 8 o'clock, the interpreter Eva arrived with more than 50 of Oedasoa's Saldaners. 50 is 'n klomp. They brought with them a young ox, which the fiscal on his recent return from Oedasoa had seen driven towards him on his way to Oedasoa's camp by some of the chief's people. Eva declared that Oedasoa's people had found this animal along the way, exhausted from being driven too hard. It was one of those that the Kaapmans had stolen from us, and Oedasoa had taken great care of thus far, so that he might return it to the commander. He asked nothing in return but 1 fathom of tobacco as reward for the man who had found and taken care of it. Nou 'n fathom is omtrent 6 voet, is 1.8 meter. Ek neem aan as hulle praat van hierdie lengtes, tabakblare, hulle maak mos so half vas in 'n tou, wat hulle, terwyl hulle droog word, en ek neem aan hulle gooi daai toue net so dit is tabakblare, wat so op mekaar gepak is, en altesaam maak dit 1.8 meter, 6 voet, 1 fathom, vir die terugkeer van 'n os. Oedasoa further gave his apologies and expressed his gratitude for the recent deputation of the fiscal to him, and said that he was so overcome by embarrassment that he did not know what to do at one of the most important of the Hollanders being sent to meet him with a wagon. This made him feel under the deepest obligation to come and pay the commander a visit, but he had been unable to do this because of his indisposition caused by the wound in his arm, the illness of his youngest child, and the recent death of his wife's mother, who was the mother of Eva also, which had taken place 2 or 3 days before, and whom they were still mourning. Amongst the Saldanus who arrived with Eva, there were 5 who had come to address the commander personally. Among them was one of the counselors who had been entrusted with the secrets to be revealed to us. His words were to be interpreted to us by Eva, who was as yet unacquainted with the secrets. So, dis nogal interessant, hulle stuur hierdie boodskappe en Eva was daar gewees, maar sy weet nog nie wat die boodskap is nie. Haar rol kom eers in wanneer daar nou offisieel gepraat word. These envoys preferred to rest first and wait till early tomorrow morning so that they might then, as on the first occasion, make known the message entrusted to them. This was granted and they were shown a resting place. After we had accepted in barter the 25 sheep and 3 head of cattle they had brought with them, the envoys and all their attendants were suitably entertained. Lekker party. Eva said that Ngonamoa had himself wished to accompany the party, but that Oedasoa had not favoured this idea. Is nog la vraagteken, hoekom nou nie? She added, however, that Oedasoa had said that when he was in better health, Ngonamoa, together with all the chiefs and great men of the Kuchokwas camps, and who knows their number, would accompany him when he came in person. After questioning her more than once on this point, we discovered that her answers were by no means consistent. In fact, that she flatly contradicted herself by saying that Oedasoa, after he had guided us to the hideouts of the Kaapmans, intended to depart with all his tribes, and that they had therefore come to get enough tobacco to last him a long time. Further, in an almost sighing tone, she let slip the remark that she would never more see the Hollanders again. So dit smaak my, hierdie raak nou so, hoor jy so, ons gaan nou kampie opslaan, hierdie Alliansie en so aan, ja wel, het gaan nou nie gebeur nie. Later on, towards the evening, when we again discussed this matter with her, she said that Oedasoa did not know what was wrong with us, with this part of the country, for every day many of his cattle and large numbers of his sheep were dying, and that was why, to his great shame, he said, he was unable to provide the commander with any cattle in recompense for the manifold kindness he had received from him. He had thus decided to break camp and move further into the interior in search of better pasturage. Early tomorrow his envoys would give us more detailed information. Nou hier is natuurlijk die Robben Eiland. Julle kan daar gaan deurlees as julle wil. Maak my nou amper niks Kaap nou oor nie. Hier het ek geskryf Oedasoa met 'n nota bene by. Waar trek ons nou al? Dis 7 minute oor 8. Hoe baie is hier nog oor? Ek dink hierdie stukke is redelik belangrik wat ek nou wil lees. Ek wil nie oor dit skippie. Is julle reg vir nog? Ek is al half so al in 'n trance ingelees. Ek gaan nie vir julle lieg nie. Maar hierdie storie met Oedasoa, kan ek nou vir julle beloof, is besig om vinnig afdrand te gaan. Kom ons sit gou weer hier op die Klipkop side. Ag, ek het nog 'n halwe sigaretjie en gou hierdie stukkie rook. Baie professioneel aan my, net hier by Klipkop se show. Sit nou rookie ou sy nippietjies. Vis gevang, Fini. Fini is Mike se pappakker, mieliebom pakker. Fini sê, sy buffer so 'n bietjie. Nou weet, party aan is my internet nie lekker nie, maar lekker my is nou groen. Waar kom Brendan Campbell nou met blueberry cheesecake? Blueberry cheesecake roomhuis. Ek's blast. Ja, toe ek nou vanaand gelees het, is hierdie besef het op by my gekom, dat die idee van, die ding is, ek sê altyd die waarheid lê altyd in die middel, daar is 'n narratief, dat is one Africa, one people, dan is daar die narratief van, ja, maar die klein identifiseerbare groepies, en so aan, en daar is transaksies, jy weet, onderhandelings, en alliansies gestig, ensovoorts. Al twee weergawes is waar. Al lyk dit nie altyd so nie. Al twee weergawes is ook onwaar, jy weet, want dit weerspieël ook in die realiteit nie. Maar dan ook weer, mens kan nie die realiteit oordra tot na persoon met 5 of 10 minute se gesels nie. Mens moet gaan in die boek lees of luister wat ek al, om regtig waar te begryp wat die dinamika was daardie tyd. En hier kan julle nou sien wat die dinamika was. Maar ek gaan gou afsluit met hierdie stuk. Ek dink ek gaan voortdryf. Dit lyk soos Klipkop het een lampie wat rooi oplig as die internet buffer. Hy is so klein in die hoek, ek kan dit amper nooit sien nie. As ek 'n breek vat nou, dan kan ek hom mooi sien, maar as ek lees, ek kom nie sommer gou agter as hy opkom nie. Kom ons sit hom gou weer op die desktop. Kom skryf ek hom uit die pad uit. Ok, die Hollanders begin raak baie verdag oor Oedasoa. En hierso het ek weer geskryf, Oedasoa, nota bene. This morning the emissaries of Oedasoa, who were 6 in number, including his son, were called into the presence of the commander and his council in the office within the fort. Their main intimation was nothing more than the statement that their chief could hardly believe that we were serious in our intentions about the Kaapmans. Nou jy waarskynlik nie, hierdie Alliansie storie, dit was net 'n grap gewees. Is julle dan ernstig? Wil julle gaan oorlog voer? Dit was alles net 'n grap, al hierdie van, die Alliansie, ek gaan my hart uitskeer, en ons moet dit weld. Alles bullshit gewees. Thereupon we asked them how Oedasoa could think thus of us, since we were not of the same race as the Kaapmans, whereas they were, and so we had more reason for having such suspicions of him than he had for distrusting us, although as we gave them to understand, we had never entertained such a thought nor suspected him in the slightest. We did not tell them, however, that the suspicion we now felt had been growing for some time. We suspect that they have daily been conspiring with the Kaapmans, planning how they might find means of bringing complete ruin on the company's establishment here. All the more because of the following statements which the emissaries proceeded to put forward. Okay, gaat ons nou. They said that Oedasoa sent us warning to be on the lookout since the Kaapmans had boasted. How would they know this if they did not have daily contact and conversations with the others? That not only would they very soon carry off all the cattle which the outlying farmers still had, but would also murder these men, their wives and children, one after the other, including even those in the fisherman's house and the duinhoop. They went on to give details of how the Kaapmans intended to carry out all this and ultimately to overwhelm the fort, for they had enough courage to scale its eastern walls, and when they were inside, to smash up all the houses and kill all the people. They made other similar statements and claimed to have heard from Thom that for this purpose he had long kept watch upon the dispositions of the Hollanders. In order to make this attack soon, he was lying ready not far from here with very large forces consisting of the Gorochohuquas, the Goringhaikwas, Ankeisua, and the strandlopers and vagrants he could scrape together. They warned us therefore to be on our guard, since Oedasoa intended to go away in search of new pastures for his livestock, for many of them had died. For the time being he would not come here, and this was why he asked for so much tobacco, bread, etc., so that it may last a long time. At this they were asked whether they had no orders to allow 2 or 3 men to show some of our men the hiding places where our enemies were located. To this it was difficult to obtain any answer, but at last we got this much out of them, that they would first have to inform Oedasoa that we were in earnest with this request, though when we questioned Eva more closely on the matter, she let slip the opinion that Oedasoa's men were disinclined to act as guides, but that they would be willing to point out from the fort those routes in the distance by which the Kaapmans could be tracked down. She also said that Oedasoa was puzzled by our perpetually insisting on having some of his men as guides, for it seemed to him that if we were really in earnest, we would track them down ourselves, so that he could come to no other conclusion that we were aiming at making peace with these people once more. Whereupon they were told that we were glad that they had thus openly expressed their opinions, and that if Oedasoa desired to leave, we would not detain him. We would proceed against our enemies unaided as time and circumstances demanded, but equally prepared to fight with his help as without it. We did not want to reject his friendship, closer alliance, and further offers of assistance, but had gladly accepted them in good will, and we intended with heart and soul to maintain this attitude. We said that the frequent negotiations we had with him about waging war and about other matters had first been on his initiative, but if his objective was nothing more than to carry on regular and peaceful trade with us without opening the subject of warfare, we would be fully satisfied. Eva, who acted as interpreter for them, then spoke these words: "Yes, Meneer van Riebeeck, these are Oedasoa's intention, and so, according to his people, everything is now at an end." By this she meant that the mission was completed, and as everything was fully understood and settled from the point of view of both parties, she asked that they might take their leave and immediately report to Oedasoa, who was waiting to journey into his own country as soon as possible. He said that we could deal with our enemies just as we pleased, for he left it entirely to us to manage as best we could, since he cared as little about the matter as if it were nothing at all. They were thereupon told that that was good, and that we were pleased to have Oedasoa's people regularly plying to and fro to barter cattle and sheep with us, but that he should kindly see to it that they never came without the little flag. Nou, daar is so 'n klein vlaggie. Ek het net oor dit gelees. Hulle het oorspronklik die vlaggie vir ons gegee. Maar hierdie vlaggie is nogal van ons is deel van Oedasoa se mense, moenie ons vrek maak nie. Wanneer kom ons nou by? Ek gaan nou net die onderstreepte gedeeltes lees. Julle kan maar verder daar saam lees as julle wil. Oedasoa had also recommended that we should never again come inland by wagon, not even to visit him, for the Kaapmans were lying in wait for these wagons and for our men everywhere. Dan, hier is nou 'n stukkie wat Eva gesê het: Meneer van Riebeeck, take good care. I shall not return for a long time. Vigorous warfare will spread throughout your country. So Eva sê nou, hoor so dat dis nou soos 'n genuine oorlog en sy wil nou niks hiermee uit te waai nie. Sy gaan nou Chila. Although many strange conclusions may be drawn from the circumstances and Oedasoa's professed friendship may be false and designed chiefly to get his sister-in-law Eva out of our hands, we could not for various considerations see our way clear to keeping her here against the will, but decided to let her go with every possible mark of favor. Should we discover later on that their intentions are full of villainy, we shall watch our chance for taking the most favorable measures. Everything seems all the more suspicious because Oedasoa's second in command, Ngonamoa by name, is the same person whom we used to call the Black Captain. In the year 1653, he visited us at the fort the evening before Harry's first theft of the company's cattle. So if we should be surprised by a large number of enemies, it can be safely assumed that all these fellows are working hand in glove for the sake of the copper, tobacco, bread and other commodities which Duman has led them to believe could be taken as booty. Duman had boasted that this could easily be accomplished and that after they had sacked the fort, they could also prevent the people on the ships from landing, or first having induced them to part with their tobacco, etc., they could put to death all the drawers of water as well as those who come to fish. Hier was die bombshell vir die aand. It is thus apparent what little prospect there is of peace in the present circumstances, nay, rather there is every prospect of war, in which case may the Almighty bless the Honourable Company with His aid and come to its assistance to protect our handful of people against the many brutal savages of this country. Nou, hier is nou die bombshell vir die aand, dit smaak my, die Oedasoa se mense en die Kaapmans, almal van hulle werk eintlik saam. Hierdie tribe en daai tribe, almal van hulle werk saam teen ons. Hulle praat van a cunning people, die mense het gedagte, jy weet, hulle is besig om Jan van Riebeeck vir 'n pop te vat. Harry word vrygelaat. Wherefore, after due deliberation, it has been agreed and decided that without delay, Harry should be fetched once more by the sloop. Hulle sê, wel, hulle het nou nie meer ander vriende nie, hulle moet nou vir Harry kry, en Harry moet kom help vir die Kaapmans soek. Kloofpas. Before noon, those who had lain in the Kloofpas returned home with a report. Nou natuurlijk, daar het nou 'n paar van Oedasoa se mense oor Kloofpas gegaan en hulle nou mense agterna gestuur en hier kom hulle nou terug. That they had not seen a single Hottentot anywhere. Okay, so daar was nou niks gekry gewees nie. Nou, Harry word geloop haal. Harry was summoned to appear before the council and questioned on various matters. He seemed to regard it as hardly possible that Oedasoa would make common cause with the Kaapmans, though he might well have promised them so much that he would not aid the Hollanders against them or concern himself in any way with their differences. So, die mense lieg so vir mekaar, jy kan nie meer glo wat hier geskryf staan nie. Al daardie goed wat ons gedink ons geleer het in die laaste paar maande, is alles dalk bullshit. Mense wat daar wil loop deurlees, julle kan daar loop deurlees, Harry is geloop haal en so aan. Nou vir die volgende episode. In the afternoon, 9 of Oedasoa's and Ngonamoa's men arrived with 5 sheep for barter. They had nothing further to say. Nou net so 'n voorsmaak vir volgende week se episode. Ons begin nou by die 12de Julie 1659. Today at the house of the fisherman, we captured a certain Hottentot belonging to the band of tobacco thieves, or Hoekwas, our chief enemies. Using Harry, who had been brought from the island, as our interpreter, we secretly, without the knowledge of the Soldaners who are at present with us, got this Hottentot by means of threats and other methods so far as to point to us in the distance where the Hoek was, together with the Kaapmans and Ankaisua are encamped. So, hulle sien, ons is nou nie vriende in die binneland nie. Het lyk vir my almal as ons vyande. Ons gaan op onsself moet staat maak, dat het in die verlede nog nie gewerk het. Ons is nou al 3 episodes in. Dis oorlog. Daar is dink 1 of 2 mense gedooi, een aan hulle kant, een aan ons kant. Baie van ons vee is gesteel, van ons huise is afgebrand. En dit is waar ons nou staan. En ek hoop ek het julle nou mooi vaak gelees. Dit is nou 'n goeie uur en 'n half gewees. Ek gaan gou vinnig 'n entry light, maar ek gaan sommer so halfpad deur die entry sommer groet ook. And other methods. Dit smaak my hierdie verskillende groepies en daai oues en die ou. Ja, absolute kakspul. Dis nou so wat Casper de Vries ons gelees het. Hierdie is nou wat 'n poespas is. 'n deurmekaar spul. Daar was nog Jan van Riebeeck het van die begin af, voordat hy Kaap toe gekom het, het hy nog altyd gesê, these are a very cunning people. Hulle is slim mense. Ten minste met die sielkunde, jy weet. Hulle weet nie hoe lieg. Te kry wat hulle wil hê. Hulle sal wat 'n storie ook al spin, solank hulle net weet die maksimum hoeveelheid tabak of koper of wat hulle kan kry. Nee, is nie ons, dis hulle, dis hulle. So leer ons. Want dan weet dat hulle net een groep is, dis ook nie heeltemal waar nie. Want wat het vir my lyk is, Oedasoa se mense is die hoofgroep. Oedasoa en Ngonomua. Nou van hulle is daar, jy weet, die mense wat graag wil, die mense wat lief is vir vryheid, hulle wil nie onder Oedasoa bly nie. Dis nou die Kaapmans groep, so hulle het 'n groep gevorm. Nou maar onder daardie groep is nou die strandlopers, wat nou regtig waar niks met niemand wil, net so 'n klein groepietjie met Harry. Nou Eva is gekoppel met in bloed met die Kotchokwas, Oedasoa se mense. Maar Harry is haar oom. En Harry is 'n strandloper. Dis wil dit vir my sê, dit is eintlik maar dieselfde groepie mense. So julle weet, die waarheid lê ergens in die middel. Anyway, ek raak so frustreerd met die boek, want ek dink die storie, die oorlog gaan nou begin en dit gebeur het nooit nie. Nou, ek kon dit nou nie meer hanteer, ek het amper die boek neergesit gesê, ek is nou klaar met die besigheid. En ek het so 'n bietjie vorentoe gespring, en so net so gescan, jy weet, en dit smaak my, daar gaan redelik lood gegooi word, ek weet nou nie hoe baie nie, ek het nou nie vol uitloop lees nie, maar dit smaak my, is daarom nog die moeite werd om aan te gaan. Dit is nog die moeite werd om aan te gaan. Maar ek gaan het sommer net daar los. Ek wil vir julle dankie sê dat julle ingeskakel het, want daar is absoluut geen skaamte daarin om jou kop uit jou gat uit te trek nie. Staan op vir daardie mense wat vir jou opstaan en dit is altyd volhard en hou koers.